Hi everyone! Welcome to another video of the orchid shelf here in beautiful Naples, southern Italy. The plant that I want to present to you today is Dendrobiumcanaliculatum variety tattonianum. What a mouthful, right? I got this plant actually just a month ago, and it's from Giulio Celandroni, an orchid nursery in Italy that has also a lot of healthy and interesting import plants. So I check it out every now and then, and I discovered this quite rare Australian orchid. And I've never grown Australian dendrobiums before, so I wanted to actually, meet that challenge and see how it goes. And look at what a cutie she is. She's actually supposed to get much bigger, so if you compare it with my hand, I'll just keep it there. Sorry for the overexposure. But the pseudobulbs are actually gonna get bigger, so if I watch other videos on YouTube that I'm going to link below, the plant does get bigger and until it reaches blooming size. OrchidSpecies.com explains that this Australian orchid grows at elevations up to 500 meters, and as such it tends to be a warm grower which needs bright light and regular watering during summer, whereas winter care is quite dry. With all statements regarding dendrobiums and dry winter care, I've actually become quite skeptical. The reason is that there are many dendrobium orchids where people say that these dendrobium orchids from this particular subsection of the genus, like Dendrobium nobile types or Dendrobium lindley types, they should be kept dry during the winter, whereas actually if you look at other videos online and forum posts made by quite experienced orchid growers, show quite clearly that that's not the case. More important, it seems, for dendrobium winter care is the lower temperature that induces flower spiking in those particular types of dendrobiums. But in general, I think we can conclude that a drier winter does not necessarily mean really dry in what we think dry should be. And why am I talking about this? Because actually we're talking about the section spatulata here, a subsection of the genus Dendrobium, and spatulata orchids. Spatulata dendrobiums are not usually counted into those groups which require an extremely dry winter rest. But I'm still mentioning this just to show you that if you read drier winter rest online, it might not actually mean dry on our terms, So I just, I don't play it by ear, but I try to read the orchid. I try to look at the orchid and see in what kind of growth stage it is. And then I try to decide, okay, am I going to give it a bit more water, keep it more moist, or am I actually going to dry it out? And if so, if I do let it dry out, I don't do it for longer than maybe 1, 2, 3 days. Temperatures in my growth space get quite cold, especially at the moment. It is March and it should be a bit warmer during this time of year, but right now we're going through a bit of a cold spell. So because I'm living in an old apartment without insulation, my temperatures go down to 16 degrees or 60 Fahrenheit at night, and it doesn't even get to 20 degrees during the day, whereas in summer it can get baking hot. So 35 degrees Celsius is really not unnormal inside my room. But during winter I just keep watering all of my orchids quite steadily. Obviously, I can't really talk about colder winter months, and I can't tell you what this orchid does because I just got it a month ago. So I'm really excited to see how it's going to behave next winter, and I'm going to be a bit more careful. But for now, what I did is I looked at the state of the orchid when I actually got it a month ago. So maybe I was also lucky, because you can see this bigger, really cute pseudobulb with this leaf. It's got 3 leaves on it still. Then there is this pseudobulb, and I can't quite read whether it's actually even an older one or whether it's actually kind of an intermediate one, and it will actually get to that size eventually. But I'm not particularly worried about this leaf now yellowing, on the bottom, at the bottom of this pseudobulb. If it just falls off, then there are new growths that will develop their own leaves. So I'm just going to see what happens. And as you can see, there are these 2 wonderful, cute 2 new growths, which eventually will develop into pseudobulbs, hopefully bigger, and hopefully so big so that it can sustain flower spikes. Now, what is much more important for me when I get new orchids is healthy root growth. So I do everything to encourage that. And one decisive factor is actually watering. So with my orchid care, I've kind of stopped worrying about wetness so much. So I see many, especially beginners orchid care videos where people talk a lot about watching out for wetness, not necessarily moisture, but the orchid shouldn't stay too wet, shouldn't stay soggy, shouldn't stay sitting in water for too long, etc., etc. But I've kind of stopped worrying about it, just because I've been noticing that moisture is really key for a great many of orchids. So most orchids where people usually say that, oh, this orchid enjoys a drier culture, under my care, they actually enjoy rather the opposite. So most of the time they just stay moist, and very rarely they will get, very dry, close to bone dry. So I kind of decided intuitively to keep this orchid the same way, even though some videos call it quite finicky, quite sensitive to stagnant moisture, quite sensitive to, prolonged periods of moisture. But I definitely have to say, even though it's still quite cold in my room, this orchid reacts surprisingly well to, how should I say, a fairly long, period of moisture. So this substrate I created in a way that it definitely does not dry out within a day or 2. So I soak this plant once a week at least for several hours. Sometimes I kind of forget my plants, and then I water it, for example, in the afternoon, and I completely forget about it, and then at night at 11 o'clock I realize my plants have been sitting in water for the past 6 hours, but that's absolutely fine. And so far, as you can see, new growth, new roots, I wanted to say, new smiley roots have been growing out of this plant. Maybe it's or let's say very probably it's a combination of many different things. So for example, first it's the potting mix. As you can see, I keep this plant in a potting mix of fine grade bark, which compared to the plant size, it's still quite coarse. Then I keep it mixed with coarse lava rock, coarse pumice, and then I also have fine grade pumice and lots of fine grade perlite inside. Especially, I noticed that pumice and perlite stay moist for longer than the lava rock, but everything just keeps everything quite airy and moisture retentive at the same time, and I believe that actually it does the orchid very well, and it seems quite happy. Of course, another decisive factor in how I believe this culture is successful so far, is the intense light. So I keep it just about 7-8 inches away from my Barina T8 lights. And another factor is constant air movement. I have an air purifier that emits fresh air pretty much constantly throughout day and night, and keeps the air moving in this orchid shelf. So this combination of light, moisture, and air movement, I guess, is benefiting the plant quite a lot. I fertilize it with MSU well water fertilizer paired with kelp extract, and kelp extract also encourages vigorous growth. And I occasionally adjust the pH using citric acid down to a value of around 5.8, 5.6. And as you see, I make sure that the substrate never gets too dry. So I, eventually in 2 or 3 days, the longer roots will actually turn gray. And then I maybe keep it grayer for 2 days or something, and then I, do the soaking again. And I'm expecting to water this plant much more when it gets really hot in summer, and I will be looking forward to doing that, because then I have to worry a bit less about, keeping the plant too moist. But even now, I'm not too worried, and so far it's been growing quite well. And I can't really say that it seems finicky to me. I keep it quite similar to my Cattleyas, and it's been growing very well. I'll be happy to give you an update, because of course there is a lot more to say about the care of this plant. But for now it's growing well, and I really hope that at some point I can present to you very, very beautiful flowers. But for now, I will link you to other videos by other growers who are much more experienced with this orchid. And I do take their advice seriously, because obviously they have a bit more of a long-term perspective. So, every time, I watch out for not overdoing it with the type of care that I give it. But yeah, as you see, so far it's been happy, and it makes me very happy to see that it's growing well. Anyways, this is Dendrobiumcanaliculatum tattonianum for you. And yeah, watch out for flowers. Happy growing.